What can I say when students ask me about my faith? Join us as we explore this important question. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. I'm joined today by Sarah Humes, one of our Teach for the Heart team members and Teach for the Heart Plus mentors. Sarah, thanks for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Linda.
So today we're doing a teacher talk episode on the question, what can I say when students ask me about my faith? And we kind of get this question in different forms often because teachers are wondering, what happens when students ask? What am I allowed to say? What should I say? What if I don't know what to say? So we're going to kind of explore that today. Before we do, though, quick disclaimer, we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. Please seek professionals for that. But we do have some knowledge on this topic, and we're happy to share it with you. So, Sarah, what first comes to your mind when someone asks you this question?
The very first thing that pops into my mind is that verse from Second Peter that says, "Always be prepared to have an answer for the faith you profess." And that feels like a lot of pressure. But I think that it's okay to just share what the Lord has done in your life.
Right. And I think that really is the key when students ask us a personal question that might tie into faith, whether it's directly like, do you believe in God? Or it's just something that you're like, yeah, the answer definitely involves my faith, is to, like you said, be ready to share, right? Not be afraid and to share what is on our hearts and what God has
Yeah.
done, right? When we're sharing our personal story, our personal experience, and just being open and honest, I think that's really powerful for students. And from the legal side, that is what we are allowed to do. So we are allowed to answer students' questions. We are allowed to, sometimes people think like you're not allowed to mention God in school. That is not true. That's not what the law says. You aren't allowed to proselytize. In other words, you aren't allowed to try to convert someone to a particular religion, but you are totally allowed to share your own experience and answer students' questions honestly.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really special thing that we forget is that there's just power in our stories and what the Lord has done in our lives. And just by sharing our personal experiences, our students are hearing the work and the wonder of the Lord. It's not like we have to say, do this and be saved. It's like, hey, this is what the Lord has done in my life. And that's amazing. And it takes some of the pressure off, I think. This is just how we get to be the light.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. It's a new year, and that means brand new resources from the Herzog Foundation for Christian Educators. Their full calendar of events is now live at herzogfoundation.connect.space. The Herzog Foundation Institute offers free training events designed specifically for educators like you. In partnership with organizations like Answers in Genesis and the Museum of the Bible, these trainings provide hands-on strategies, biblical resources, and practical classroom tools to help you integrate faith and learning every day. And the best part, they are completely free for you and your school or homeschool group. Whether you're looking for fresh inspiration for your classroom or professional development to grow your ministry, the Herzog Foundation is here to help. Find an event near you at herzogfoundation.connect.space. Now back to our conversation. Exactly. And there shouldn't be pressure of like, oh my goodness, I have this opportunity. I have to say everything and get, all these things, like recognizing this interaction is an opportunity God has given us, and we don't know what God is doing in their life. But just if we could just answer honestly, just share, that might be one piece in what God is doing, right? I mean, often as God is working in all of our lives, it's not a single moment, it's many multiple moments. And we don't know how what we say God might bring back to their mind in the future, or be a stepping stone to another question. So those opportunities are just really, really neat.
They are. So, Linda, what would you do though if like a student asked you a hard question about maybe a controversial topic or a topic that you were like, I don't know this answer.
Well, I mean, that's tricky. That's like a couple different questions, right? Because obviously there's like these deep theological things that you're just like, I don't know. I think it's okay to be honest and just say, man, that's a really good question. I don't know. And I think then you could kind of decide based on your personality, the situation, all of that, like, do I want to research it and come back and talk to about it? Or do I just want to leave it at that. It could just kind of depend on the situation. And then you also asked, though, about a difficult question. And I think those are hard, right? Like if someone were to ask us about personal beliefs in a really controversial area, something like we talked about last week, talked about abortion, transgenderism, like these tough things that people might know Christians are different. I would pray, right? Pray for wisdom. We were just studying Ecclesiastes, a message on Ecclesiastes in church, and it was that I noticed there's a time to speak and a time to be silent. I thought that was
Yeah.
just so interesting, right? And the Holy Spirit can kind of help us know, is this a time to speak or is this a time to not? But I think that a lot of times we just shy away and think, well, I'm like too scared to say what's true. And if someone has asked us our personal beliefs, and once again, with wisdom and prayer, I think it is good to share. Well, I personally believe this. And I know, particularly in some of these controversial areas, the world has been led to believe that if you don't agree, you hate. And I think there's an incredible opportunity to just show in your response, how you respond and the things you say. Basically, I don't agree, but I don't hate. And kind of just share, hey, this is my perspective and my belief, and just kind of do that. Have you ever had experience with anything like that, Sarah?
So, not so much in school, but with my own children, I have.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate where I have a wonderful small group that I get to participate in. And one of the things that I've learned is I can take those big questions that I don't know and kind of hash them out with them. But one of the other things that has been really great is I've been able to practice how to respond to my kids in that
Mhm.
group. It's almost like a role play where I'm like, okay, this is how I'd respond. And so I'm just wondering, like, if people have friends or a small group or a life group, if they could practice those big questions they get asked in a safe space, not to be rehearsed, but because those big questions, even talking about them, it makes me a little nervous.
Mhm.
And that way you just feel a little bit more calm. And, you can just the more calm you are, I feel like the more apt you are to let the Holy Spirit guide. And I don't know, I really have enjoyed practicing sharing my faith, sharing big answers.
I love that. That's such a, I think, wise idea, right? To share, and it doesn't even have to be as formal as a small group. I mean, it could be a spouse, a
Yeah,
friend, a teacher friend that's also a believer. I love that because, and you said something interesting. You said, um, I think when you're more relaxed, it's easier to let the Holy Spirit lead, right? And so I know we were talking before, this kind of this tension between like, it's not necessarily like we're rehearsing, we are rehearsing, but not scripting, right? You're not like writing
right.
a script that you're going to like say verbatim. That's not recommended. But I do think in practicing and rehearsing, I know for me, like, and I think of this in so many areas related to faith where it's like, this is a tricky thing I'm trying to articulate. It's like, I have to wrap my mind around it. And then you have to kind of go through this process of figuring out, like, how do I actually articulate that well? How do I say it in a way that makes sense to somebody else? So I love that idea of practicing because the more you work through it, the more it starts to make sense. But also not being afraid, right? If I haven't practiced this, just go, right? Like pray, ask God, do your best. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can always circle back to the student and say, "Hey, I thought more on that. Would you like to hear my updated thoughts?" So
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think just the last little thing but big thing is just humility. It's that air of this is this is the best answer I have in my experience, and I think that speaks volumes.
absolutely. Well, thanks, Sarah, so much for talking about this. I hope this has been helpful for those of you guys that have been listening. If you have a question that you would like us to answer on one of these Teacher Talk episodes, we would love to hear it. Just go to teachfortheheart.com/teacher talk and you can submit your question there. Well, this episode has been brought to you in partnership by the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. I look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.